Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 318 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Hey Seth, doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. We actually have some really interesting topics to talk about today, so kind of excited about that. But before we get into that, we have another co-host in Krim. How are you today, Krim?
Oh, I am great. I am excited. Some of the news that we've got today has got me pretty pumped.
Yeah, so we got two big topics for today. One is Wizards announced some stuff coming in the future last week. Universes Beyond, a new product line with some crossovers and so forth happening. So we wanted to dig into that. And then also, we're in Time Spiral Remastered spoiler season, which means lots of sweet old border cards, some cool reprints. So we're going to talk about that too. And then, of course, answer your fish mails. So that's the plan for today. But before we get into it, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit. And if you've ever experienced the horror of trying to sell your Magic cards online, it's a lot of work, a lot of typing and shipping and sorting, and it's not really a whole lot of fun. Well, Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your cards. And if you want to avoid all those hassles and all the time it takes to sell your cards, this new service from the folks at Card Hoarder will sort, grade, and sell your Magic cards for you. And once your shipment is processed, you'll get the proceeds minus their fee. And right now, you can get a 10% discount by going to cardconduit.com/goldfish. So thank you so much to Card Conduit for supporting the show today, and let's talk some Magic. Let's start with Universes Beyond, the big announcement from last week. So, Richard, why don't you kind of set the stage? Give us the overview of what Universes Beyond is, and then we can talk about it a bit.
So I heard The Walking Dead Secret Lair was one of the greatest Magic products of all time, and we're going full Universes Beyond in 2022. So there was an investor call last week, and Wizards announced that they will be expanding their game system to other IP. And on the docket, they've listed Warhammer 40K and Lord of the Rings for 2022. And they said, quote unquote, full expansions, whatever that means. That could just be investor speak. They haven't really specified. But what we do know is this: there are Warhammer 40K commander decks coming. Okay, they will have different frames and a different holofoil, but the same card back, which means that they will be legal where Magic cards are played. So this will affect older formats like Vintage and Legacy. Wizards has stated that these will not be standard legal, so they're not making a standard expansion, but rather these will be things like commander decks, secret lairs, or other such things. They haven't specified completely. And they said that the cards themselves will be a mixture of the Ikoria treatment, where you have a Magic version and then the IP version, the Godzilla version, or straight up Walking Dead, where the card itself is the only name and like that's it. So they said that it'll depend, but they plan on having both. And then the last footnote is the D&D set that's coming up is not Universes Beyond. The D&D set, if it's Wizards IP, will fall under like the normal Magic set rather than Universes Beyond. But TLDR, these things are legal. You will cast like Teferi bouncing your opponent's Legolas, who will then equip the One Ring or something and smash your face. I don't know anything about Warhammer, but it will be mixable in Legacy and Vintage for sure. And then we know we have Warhammer 40K commander decks, so you can sit down and like battle it out with Warhammer EDH decks. So what do you guys think?
I am so upset with the fact that it's Lord of the Rings. This is the only issue that I have.
Wow, are you a Lord of the Rings hater, Chris?
Yeah. So for those that have known anything about me, I do not like Lord of the Rings. This is strictly speaking the movies. I don't know anything about the books, so sure. But like when it comes to the movies, they are the most boring forms of cinema I've ever seen in my life. A lot of nothing happens, and I think like legitimately, if just like you adjust a few things in the plot points, you could just resolve the whole issue within half a movie. So, other than that, though, and I'm pretty sure a lot of that doozy, after hearing that one, that powerful opener, a lot of people are like, what else could he possibly say? But legitimately, I think the Worlds Beyond thing outside of that is actually kind of cool. And I mean, as for like, Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, Magic is not that far off of what like that world and the realms of both of those IPs are. So if you're worried about like seeing like Gandalf the Grey, like I don't know, there's a Gandalf command or something like that, right? Sure, that doesn't bother me as much. But yeah, like I think what this means for the game as a whole is pretty interesting, just because this means that I can have the properties. I joked about it, but like now, like the idea that maybe somewhere down the line there's a World of Warcraft, or I mean just a Warcraft. No, not Hearthstone, but a Warcraft. Like I joked about the Warcraft Secret Lair, but like now that there's a chance, or maybe even Marvel, Transformers, any of that stuff, I think that could be pretty cool, pretty fun to see. And like if this is definitely something along the lines of something I would probably pick up.
It's kind of hilarious because me and Krim don't agree on much pop culture wise. Like normally the things that you like, I don't even know for the most part. Yeah. But the one thing that unites us is I also can't stand Lord of the Rings. It's so tedious. Yes. I do not understand. One of my ex-girlfriends loved that movie series. It was like her favorite thing. So I had to watch them so many times. Oh. And it actually ruined them for me for life because they could tell the whole story in like an hour, and they tell it over like 12 hours across 3 movies. Yeah. Like the whole thing could be an hour long. So yes, I very much agree that I personally find Lord of the Rings very tedious, and it doesn't especially interest me. As far as the idea of having these crossovers in Magic, I guess I have mixed feelings. So for me personally, I'm kind of like meh. I don't really care or know Warhammer. I don't really like Lord of the Rings. I can see people saying this kind of like takes away from Magic's lore to some extent, and I can see where they're coming from. I haven't really decided if I completely agree with that because I don't know.
It's a multiverse, though. There,
yeah, you know what I mean. There's a lot of weird things in Magic already. So is it really that much of a leap to have? I guess it's a little different having specific characters from other IPs rather than like a generic elf that looks like it was from Lord of the Rings or whatever. But I definitely. For me personally, would I choose to have my version of Magic have crossover IPs? Probably not. But I've also like come to grips with the fact that what I personally like best in Magic isn't necessarily what's best for Magic in all cases. And I feel like this is going to be a really good thing for the game overall. Like, I can deal with Smeagol aggro or what, I don't know, like Lord of the Rings characters. Like, I could deal with that. Like, that's fine. That's not a deal breaker for me by any means, especially if this is going to bring in new players and players who haven't played the game before. There are Lord of the Rings fans and Warhammer fans, and it's close enough to Magic that some of those people might want to try out the game. And if this is going to bring those people in and excite them and bring new blood into the community, I think it's worth it. Even if me personally, I'm like, whatever, like Warhammer, I don't care. Like, sure, like do it, don't do it. What? It's just not a big deal either way to me. But I feel like this can be a powerful tool for bringing new players into the game. And I think that's something that franchise players tend to miss. Like, my perspective has really changed recently teaching my little nephew how to play Magic. He loves stuff like this. For him, like, a Lord of the Rings Magic card is like super cool. And that's like something that will legitimately get him excited and keep him in the game, learning the game, playing the game. So even though like some old timers like me are like, man, like, I don't know, like this isn't my version of Magic, I think it's going to be worth it in the end.
I mean, when you think about it, right, we already have people who like how many Lord of the Rings altars are there, right? Like in Magic. I think I've seen so many altered cards to just be Lord of the Rings stuff. So You know, and like you had mentioned, I think this is going to be pretty cool for like the masses and, you know, to get people into the game. And it, you know, like this, my issue with Secret Lair Walking Dead wasn't that it was Walking Dead. It was the method of distribution. So like this gets around that, right? So, hey, maybe. So other than that, like I'm not worried about anything else. If you're telling me that this isn't like in a secret lair, then it's open to the mass and they can pick it up, then that's great.
So
what do you think, Richard?
I'm gonna have to say, you guys be tripping, Lord of the Rings haters, both of you.
Oh, come on.
Literally, you're playing a fantasy card game where like the entire basis of like the whole genre is Lord of the Rings, okay? Like they invented fantasy, okay? And how can you guys not like this?
I mean, I agree. The movies invented fantasy. I would fantasize what I would be doing after it was done. And
yeah, thinking about all the great things I could do that is not watching this movie right now. That was my fantasy.
Maybe I have a special affinity to Kithkin and thus hobbits, but I can't believe you guys don't like Lord of the Rings. And it explains why you don't care about the Magic universe, because you don't like the fantasy aspect of it, right? Like,
I love fantasy things. I love fantasy things.
But you don't like Lord of the Rings. So weird.
I agree.
I mentioned this before. When I started playing, if it was like Magic cards were literal playing cards with like the Queen and the Jack, and if that's what they look like, it would have been all the same to me. So I've grown to enjoy the flavor aspect of it more, but I didn't come from like the fantasy, like nerd culture, quote unquote, like reading comic books growing up and stuff. So I didn't have that same fantasy connection to it that I know a lot of Magic players did. I've come to appreciate a lot more since I've been playing Magic, but when I first started, I was attracted to like how good the game itself was more so than like the fantasy aspect of it.
Okay, I mean, so regardless of how much I like Lord of the Rings, that's like irrelevant. But like, how do I feel about different IP in Magic? I think it's a step backwards. I think that Wizards, like we know Magic Digital is like super slow and 20 years behind the curve. Like I think we're actually just going backwards now with the brand. Like in this day and age, everyone is trying to hold on and expand to their IP, right? It's the reason you have Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, like all those networks. They're like, I don't want to put my stuff on Netflix anymore. And Netflix has to make originals and only originals because no one else will put their stuff on Netflix platform, right? Here we are with Magic, like kind of just giving up on their story and just putting like other stories into their story, right? They're like Lord of the Rings franchise, come on in. Warhammer franchise, come on in. Like, I want to see the WandaVision of Magic, right? I want to see the Mandalorian of Magic. I want to see the Magic IP expanding, not kind of taking a backseat to these other IPs using the game system. So I think it's kind of backwards. And I think it's a little weird. Like, I don't want to see, like, Spider-Man in my Magic game. I'm like, playing a fantasy game. I, like, joined to play, like, I don't want to see, like, friggin', like, the Infinity Gauntlet, like, you know, like, in my games, right? That's weird. It's not
out of the realm of possibilities, right? I mean, we're a multiverse.
But like, now what? Are you going to make it the most powerful card in existence? If not, then it's just not correct. Right? And then what? You're going to just break the balance of Magic because the story makes no sense now? Like Jace is like the weakest character because Superman is here? Like, I don't know. What are you going to do, right? How are you going to fix all these inconsistencies?
So does it make you feel any better, Richard, knowing that they're not standard sets and they're not theoretically, if I'm understanding this announcement right, they're not like taking away, this isn't the right word, but real Magic sets, quote unquote, to make these crossover products. This is just like an extra thing. Like, is it really a deal breaker if the Jumpstart slot next year instead is a Lord of the Rings crossover set that people can play in their commander decks, you know, whatever? Like, maybe some of the cards are good enough for Legacy, but they're not legal in Modern and Pioneer. Like, does the fact that they're doing it that way make you feel any better about it? I think I would feel a lot worse about it if it was like, like, we're not doing core sets anymore. Instead, every year we're going to have this standard legal crossover set, which is what I initially thought because the D&D set's replacing a crossover, and I thought it was going to be the same thing. So I would be more concerned, I think, if it was like that. But is that really a deal breaker for you if a supplemental slot is taken up by one of these crossovers and you may or may not even see them? Like, after the big Walking Dead freak out, I've still not really seen people playing them, or it's not like they're at the top of the EDH rec rankings for commanders, or even like heavily played at all. I've heard other people saying that too. Like, I've actually never seen anyone play a deck build around them.
Because you can't get access to them. No, okay. But seriously though, like, I'll give you some other statements. Magic Online is not dying. We're just gonna run side by side with Magic Arena. Buy a box promos will not be standard playable, so that they're easily accessible. Right? Secret layers are just promotional, right? They're optional. You don't need to buy them. Right? They say this now, but when, the Lord of the Rings supplemental product outsells the fall standard expansion, what are they going to do? Surprise, the next set's going to be like MCU or something, right? Like, they'll just go where the numbers go. Right? So
I'm not going to complain about that, but I might have a little bit of a bias there.
Like, if you slap Spider-Man on a set and it sells like 10x what Jace the Mind Sculptors.
You mean it will? It will though, right?
Then why would they ever invest in Jace again, right? You would just keep investing in Spider-Man, right? And that's how it's gonna go, right? Either that or it like flops and then we never see this ever again, right? But either way, like, I wouldn't hold Wizards to its promises, right? This is their current plan, and if it's successful, they'll just double down on it.
I guess I am a little concerned about that. When I saw them say not standard, my initial thought was like, okay, you're saying that now, but like, will you be saying that 2 years from now? I'm not 100% sure. And I would like it. I would like the idea of Universes Beyond a lot less if it was something that was everywhere in Magic. Is like a fringe fun thing on the side that, sure, maybe once in a while you run into them on the commander tables, or maybe there's a Rick that actually shows up in a fringe legacy deck. If it ends up being like that, then whatever. If it ends up being that we end up in a standard format where it's Spider-Man versus Lord of the Rings versus Warhammer, and those are like our expansions for the year, that would be a bridge too far for me, I think.
Like what if it's the worst case scenario where Wizards is sitting down with like Disney executives and they're trying to cut a deal for Spider-Man, and they're like, Disney's like so good and coveted, right? Wizards like this little guy at the table, and they're like, look, we'll let you put Spider-Man in the set if you make him the most broken card of all time. I want to see him Oko plus Hogak plus Earl combined into one card.
He'd be Izzet though, because he's blue and red. So we're okay.
I guess there is some amount of concern there though. Like you saying it in a joking way, but does that weigh into it? Is Wizards feeling like, okay, because this is someone else's iconic property, we got to go doubly far to make sure that these cards are actually good? That would be a pressure that I would hope Wizards wouldn't be experiencing. Because like my overall feeling is like, if the game's good, I can deal with anything. But if the game is bad, in the game itself, like the turning your card sideways and getting your opponent's life total to 0, like if that suffers somehow because of this, because Wizards is like, we got to push these cards harder than Oko because it's a crossover, that would be an issue for me. Like, but if the game's good, I don't really care a whole lot personally, and I know that other people do, and I'm not trying to diminish your experience, but personally, I don't really care a whole lot if I'm attacking with a Lord of the Rings character or a can of Pepsi or something.
A can of Pepsi.
Big Bird.
Equipment.
Big Bird.
It'll be like double Embercleave.
I mean, yeah, well, the thing here is, I think that's going to happen already anyways, whether there's a Spider-Man attached to the card or not, right? I think the cards will eventually get there anyways. So whether or not, like, oh, they have to push, I mean, I hope they don't push it because, well, it's Spider-Man for multiple reasons. I think Spider-Man's overrated. And second off,
Girl just dropping so many bombs today.
Just haymakers. Spider-Man's overrated. You only like him for his villains. And on top of that, it wouldn't matter because I think that the game was already going to move in that power creep anyways. But I just do not hope they don't, like, I mean, I also hope they don't push said card because, it's a popular card. However, I do think that power level of cards is already going there. So, if it's attached to Spider-Man, can of Pepsi, Big Bird, whatever. I'm with Seth. I love the game. I love how it plays. I love everything about that. And I mean, of course, as long as the artwork stays, awesome, however they choose to do that, because like that's what initially drew me into the game, the artwork. So yeah, like I if the game's good, the art's sweet, sure.
So Richard, question for you. You mentioned Kithkin kind of coming from Lord of the Rings. How do you think they're going to integrate something like that? Like, Lord of the Rings, it's got to have hobbits. That's what Lord of the Rings is about.
The hobbits will exist on the plane of Lord of the Rings, right?
Well, I mean, do you think they'll do that? Like, do you think they'll integrate them into Magic? Because I think that will have a big impact on how playable they are. Like, if hobbits are creature type Kithkin, then you're going to play them in your Kithkin Commander deck. If they're literal hobbits,
then they would be literal hobbits.
Where are you going to play them?
I can't imagine
you think so?
Lord of the Rings IP people being, yeah, okay, we'll just convert them to Kithkin, right? Like, there will be 100% hobbits, right?
Yeah. And then, by the way, like, that's not that far off. Like, it's like, I don't think that's like a ridiculous thing either. Like, it's like,
yeah,
so
I mean,
hobbits?
But I think like the elves from Lord of the Rings, you'll be able to mix them with like other elves. It would not shock me if like 2 years from now, we see Legacy Legolas elves or some, you're going to have like Spiderman aggro or something. You're going to have some of these cards integrated into the older formats because some of you will have humans, obviously, right? Dwarves, like those kind of things. Like I think there will be overlap. It's just kids can get kind of left out here because hobbits are actually different.
What do you think about the fact that no one's asking for Jace to show up in their game? That's something else I saw people bring up. Yeah. Like, if Magic was really doing so well, why aren't Magic cards showing up in Lord of the Rings or in Warhammer? Like, why are those cards showing up here? Because that was the other thing that came out of the investors conference call or whatever it was we made an absurd amount of money. Magic made more money than it's ever made, to the point where they're splitting it off into its own division. It made $900 million last year, which is Wizards made between Magic and D&D. $900 million, which is a huge increase over the numbers that we've had from a few years ago. So if Magic is like doing so amazingly, why are other games coming to Magic rather than Magic also going to other universes?
So there's one counter example, and that's Lego. Right? Where you have like Lego Batman and Lego Superman and like all those weird things. But outside of that, like everyone's trying to hold on to their IP, right? They don't want to sell it out, right? Like if you have a game system that's actually good, like why would you sell your things? Like why would you put Fortnite characters into Halo or something, right? Like what? Right? So you're trying to just hold on to your characters. And usually when we see these kind of crossovers, it's like to a lighter extent. Like maybe you get skins or like cosmetics or something from another brand. But usually these crossovers you see into like totally different realms. Like you see Jace on a can of Pepsi, right?
I hope that happens.
There's no conflict, right? They're not like both games competing or anything. It's just like literally a drink, and gamers drink drinks. So we'll just put like Jace on it. So yeah, I'd rather see that rather than us kind of like selling out Jace, right? Like Jace can get replaced. He's going to get replaced by Superman. He's going to get replaced by Gandalf. Like all these characters are much better characters than Jace, right? So you can't put them in the same space.
Do you think this will lead to Magic breaking out more in popular culture? Like I had to go to the store the other day and drove past a McDonald's, and apparently they're doing like Pokemon Happy Meal toys,
which are sold out.
Apparently they're so popular. Yeah, the sign said they were so popular that they were limiting them to like 2 per person or something because they were so popular. Like, I mean, is this going to get Magic there? Like, are we going to have Magic Happy Meal toys? Are we going to enter the mainstream consciousness, or why does Pokemon enter the mainstream consciousness and get Happy Meal toys, and Magic is still Magic, I guess, and not at that point? Well, like, what's the difference?
Pokemon is legendary in its own right? I mean, like, it had games, had a TV show, all that stuff. Magic still got to catch up to do anything near that.
Yeah,
like, it's being a good
proper
game.
IP, right? Like, you know of Pokemon without actually playing the games. Like, have you actually played Red and Blue and Yellow and whatever, all the way up to the current games? Like, a lot of people have not, right? A lot of people, maybe they saw the cartoon.
Poke Boomer. Here I am.
Maybe they played the card game. Maybe they saw the movie, right? Maybe they watched one of like 8 million episodes of, anime/cartoon on TV, right? Like, it's just so out. Same with like Marvel. Like, many people that watch Marvel have not picked up a comic book ever. Right? They've expanded beyond their original thing, Whereas I would be very shocked if someone knew who Jace the Mind Sculptor was, who's like never played, Magic the game.
Well, what if the TV show and this helps that? Nah?
It could, but let's say at McDonald's there were Spider-Man Magic cards available with your Happy Meal. Is the draw Spider-Man or is the draw Magic the Gathering? Right? And the draw will be Spider-Man. Yeah.
But I guess my thing here is like I just don't see what's bad about that. That's a good, like a little bit like what Seth was saying earlier is how it'd be cool like to have my nephews and nieces want to play Magic because they like Spider-Man, but then it was a Spider-Man attached to a Magic card, right? Or I mean, in this situation, like it could be like a Doctor Strange card, and I would love because I mean I already have like Doctor Strange alters on tons of my cards, so now to see it in paper form, that'd be amazing. I don't know, or like a Grimlock or something like that. I mean, we jokingly had a Grimlock card or whatever but Transformer stuff, but how cool would that be, right? Like an Optimus Prime card for reals.
The focus of the company, right? I guess like, so if that's very popular, say Transformers cards are very popular, which Transformers TCG is not, right? But so they print a set and then you're like, this is great. I want more, right? Like I want, let's say I have Gandalf and I want, part 2 and part 3 and part 4 or whatever. They got to keep printing more, right? And eventually they got to make a cut somewhere, right? They got to be like, well, since Lord of the Rings is selling like gangbusters, Magic is not doing well, we'll reduce the number of Magic expansions by 1, right? And then by 2, and then by 3, and then it ends up like Magic Online, right? So it's like the focus of the company, I guess. Like they're just going to keep going after different IPs, right? And I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think my hope would be that if someone gets into the game because of whatever, Lord of the Rings crossover, like that's their introduction to Magic. And they're like, wow, like, sure, maybe I started this because Gandalf was on a card or whatever. But now I actually like kind of like this game. Maybe I'll like check out this modern format, or maybe I'll, whatever. And they actually become Magic players. And then it's not about like, oh, when's the next Lord of the Rings crossover? But then it's about when's the next Magic crossover. So I guess that would be my hope, is how that would go, is this is like a way to onboard people into the game that maybe have never heard of it or don't know what it is or have never given it a chance before. But if they see their favorite IP, maybe that's the thing that will like let them give Magic a shot, and then they'll experience the Magic multiverse, along, because they started with this crossover. I guess my other concern is this does kind of a little bit seem like a Hasbro thing. Like Monopoly, I think, might be the nightmare example in some sense. Like, have you ever looked at the number of versions of Monopoly that exist? It is probably hundreds. Like, I'm looking at the list right now, and there's
way
like
more than hundreds.
Oh, maybe it's thousands, but there's like Chocolate Opoly and G.I. Joe Collector's Edition and The Nightmare Before. There's a Grateful Dead. How in the world is there? That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. There's a Grateful Dead version of Monopoly. There's a million different options out there, but honestly, everyone that I know that owns Monopoly owns the normal Monopoly game, like the original Monopoly. I'm sure that people sometimes have like, like a novelty special edition, but I don't know. I don't feel like I didn't even know Grateful Dead Monopoly existed. So it's not like it's taking over for Monopoly. It's just like a weird novelty product. So maybe that's where we're heading.
Well, I would look more, I mean, I guess because like when I think of Monopoly and I think the gameplay is like a meme. However, Catan like has that, right? Like Catan has like a Star Trek. Catan has Game of Thrones, right? So Catan actually has some sweet gameplay. And I mean, for me, it all rings true. Just like Catan is still at its base a great game. And I do not care about the IPs and what changes. Do I own the Star Trek one? No. But have I played it? Yeah, sure. It's fun. And I mean, like, I like it. I like the idea behind this. So I don't know.
So Monopoly is one of Hasbro's like top IPs. So if you think like how much money Monopoly makes, okay, versus Magic the Gathering, it's like astounding that this like $10, I don't know, it's like $30 for like the special version. So it's like expensive, but it's the thing you buy once and it's like been around since forever. It keeps selling like crazy, in part to these IP things. I have a Pokemon Monopoly that I was gifted.
I have that too.
Right?
Do you have the red and blue one?
I have no attachment to whatever the name of the guy holding the money bags is on Monopoly. Like, he's their IP.
Jace. We'll call him Jace in this situation.
But no one knows who he is because they didn't invest in it, right? They didn't invest in that character. They're like, forget these characters and, Boardwalk and Park Place, they're replaceable. We don't care about them. They're placeholders. We'll replace them with other IP, right? And it works, right? Monopoly is somehow still relevant. Like Krim said, it's like one of the worst games you could possibly ever play. It's a very poorly designed game.
Yes, it is.
But here it is, right? It is that popular, right?
How not to have fun with friends.
So I don't want Magic to be like that, right? I don't want us to look at Jason and be like, who's this guy? Get Spider-Man in here, right? And I don't want gameplay mechanics to go down the tubes, right? Like, for example, if you have a budget and you can spend more money getting more money to acquire IP rights for your product, or spend that money into R&D and then end up with Oko. Like, where would you spend the money, right? You're like, I'll just spend some money getting Superman. 100%. It'll sound like way better than trying to balance this game, right? So,
well, I hope that's not the case, right? Like, when I say I enjoy this thing, I'm already worried about where R&D is going, and that's without the third-party IPs.
But if you're going after casual players who just want to play with Gandalf, right? Do they care enough that standard is balanced or whatever, right? Like, they may not care, right? They're just like, I'm just going to sling some spells and call it a day, and then I'll spend money on the next set, and that's it. And they're not trying to like grind to the Pro Tour or something, so they don't care that the game is actually grossly imbalanced, right? So if that is the concern, your concern as a product developer would be getting more rights, right? Like getting more characters, getting more of what people want, like better artwork, rather than making sure this 2-drop is actually balanced.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to remain hopeful. I can see both sides of it. Like, I can see the drawbacks to it, and I think there are drawbacks to it. At the same time, like, I'm hoping that the upsides of bringing in new players, hopefully, like, outweighs those. Although, honestly, like, finding out that Baconopoly exists does make me a little bit more concerned than I was before we started this podcast. What do you think about them presumably not being on Arena? Like, that's the other thing that's kind of weird. If these aren't legal they aren't legal in formats that are on Arena, so I assume they're probably not going to be on Arena.
That sounds like something we should fix by making them standard legal, Seth. Look, you see how this conversation can very easily and reasonably go into the worst case, but I think skins would have been the perfect way to do this. Like skins where you have promo versions of, let's say, the original 5 Planeswalkers, but instead of the original 5 Planeswalkers, you have a Marvel character, but the card is still called Chandra, right? But it's like altered, basically. I think something like that would be better, but the problem with that is like the IP creators would never agree to it, right? Like if you're going to put Spider-Man on a card, the card better say Spider-Man and not, I don't know who the equivalent is, Tybalt or whatever, right? So, but I think that way you can actually get the cool art and the cool IP into the game without affecting the game itself.
So one last question about this, and then we should probably talk a little bit about an actual Magic set that's being previewed. So we know Lord of the Rings is coming. We know Warcraft 40K is
Warhammer.
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 Yeah.
Oh boy.
Close
We've lost
enough.
like all our subscribers this episode.
What else do you think could fall into that same category of possible crossover? I know we've been kind of like saying, oh, Spider-Man. To me, Spider-Man feels pretty far removed from Magic compared to like Lord of the Rings, for example. What else is like close enough to Magic that it would be an obvious crossover opportunity?
Like what do you mean by like close enough? Like you mean like just the worlds that they're in?
Yeah, well,
like
I mean,
flavor,
we talked about Lord of the Rings, how it kind of created the fantasy genre.
Right.
And then Warhammer is at least like a game. So you have that like connection,
Marvel,
I guess.
Marvel and Warcraft both have card games, right? Because there's Versus, I played that. And then there's, the World of Warcraft card game itself, which I also played. And so, I don't know. I mean, I could see all of these actually happening. And I think that's why I'm excited about Universes Beyond. I think Marvel is entirely a possibility. I think Transformers is already under the Hasbro umbrella, right? So, and it's already had a failed card game, but a card game. And like these are things I actually expect to see now, and that's why I'm excited, because I am dreading the Lord of the Rings set, and if anything is actually good from it, I am gonna feel so miserable if I actually need it for one of my decks.
I don't think flavor has anything to do with this. I think if Wizards could get Spider-Man, they would do it in a heartbeat. I think they can't get Spider-Man, right? It's like too expensive.
But I think
Disney will not allow it.
I think what Seth wants to know is flavor-wise, right? So, right? I'm assuming you're asking flavor-wise.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was leaning, more towards like the flavor aspect. Although I do think that Richard's point is a reasonable one, that maybe it's only TV shows that are like, a decade past their prime that
washed up franchises.
Yeah, that will give Wizards their IP. So maybe we don't see X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff that's actually popular, at least for a couple decades, until people don't care anymore.
Okay, so think back 10 years and think of what was popular in the fantasy realm. What will we have that Wizards could go after?
Lost, maybe. Lost set.
Oh yeah. Then what? Well, actually, no. That's getting a comeback. I was gonna say Dexter, but that's not fantasy. But it's a show that's it's been around.
Yeah. So I don't know. Any other thoughts on Universes Beyond before we move on? All right. Well, I'm sure this will come up in the future. The first set is not releasing until next year. We don't have a ton more information, but I'm sure we will get some in the future. And if you have feelings about Universes Beyond, let us know in the comments, because it's actually a very interesting topic, I think. And there's a lot of different opinions on it. So if you have thoughts, make sure to let us know. But let's talk a little bit about Spiral Remastered. So we are technically in the middle of a 1-week spoiler season. We have gotten about halfway through, a little less than halfway through the set so far. Richard, what are some of the standouts from Spiral Remastered?
All right. So far they've been doing basically a color a day, and we have Wub, also known as Esper, revealed. I was looking at the cards and I'm like, wow, these are really crim cards. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. It's because it's only been Esper colors. But so we have the base set, notable cards in the actual set. So this is original border, current border cards, I guess. We have cards of notable value: Teferi, Mage of Zalfir, Ancestral Vision, Restore Balance, Angel's Grace, Venser, Shaper Savant, Lotus Bloom, Walk of the Aeons. I think that's it. There's not too many.
Damnation. We just got Damnation today.
Is it Damnation Old Border? Damnation is Old Border.
No. It's main set. It's a mythic. It's a mythic in the main set.
You're right. Damnation. Moving on to the Old Border cards. There are a lot, and they have chosen basically playable cards. So all these cards are playable, but I'll note some constructed playable. I guess Commander playable as well. Baral, Chalice of the Void, Flicker Wisp, Laboratory Maniac, Master of the Pearl Trident, Mystic Confluence, Ponder, Palace Jailer, Path to Exile, Paradoxical Outcome, Remand, Resto Angel, True Name Nemesis, Treasure Cruise, Thraben Inspector for some reason.
Is that on there?
Which one?
Hey, Thraben Inspector is like one of the most playable cards on the whole list.
It actually is. I don't know if it deserves an Old Border though, but Lingering Souls up here as well. But yeah, basically they just looked at all the old playable cards in Commander, Vintage, Legacy, Modern, and like a lot of them are here, especially cards that go with like lots of older cards, like Master of the Pearl Trident, where you have lots of old merfolk. They added those, and especially the blue spells, Remand, Ponder, and things like that show up as well. So yeah, what do you guys think about Spiral Remastered so far?
You know how I was talking about, like Spider-Man being mediocre and all of that? I think I've got something else along these lines that I've already navigated, and I think I'm just desensitized, like, from all. I think we had this discussion in the group chat, right? Like, seeing all these old borders probably would have been cooler to me like 4 or 5 years ago. Now, after seeing all the borders that have come out from Magic, like think of the new Strixhaven stuff, for example. The Japanese variant of all the spells, like Demonic Tutor, Swords, Opt, or even the other fancy, what is it called? The Mystical Archives. After getting all these borders that we've gotten in these last couple of years, this whole set just looks boring.
I disagree. I love the old border cards, and I think I would consider them, if we consider them the same as like the showcase cards and all the different versions, I would consider Old Border to be top tier showcase cards, like, for me personally. But I think I have noticed a big divide in the community where you have some people that absolutely love this and are like, I haven't bought a box of Magic cards in like 10 years. I'm buying one of these. And then you have a lot of maybe newer players who don't have a connection to Old Borders or to Time Spiral block, the original block. And they're just kind of like meh, like, whatever, like, I don't care about this when Strixhaven spoilers starting. So I have noticed a huge divide, but I feel like Wizards has focused on these niche markets a lot. That's something we've seen, that the infamous, this product's not for you, even though that's a horrible wording of that. What they're trying to say is, like, not every set is for every type of Magic player. And I feel like for a certain group of Magic players, that Time Spiral Remastered has been like a home run so far. Like, there's a certain group that loves the old border cards, is nostalgic about like limited in original Time Spiral block, and for them this set is really amazing, even though they're a small percentage of the player base overall. And I guess the good news is everyone gets the reprint. So worst case, if you don't care about old borders and you don't care about Time Spiral, at least you get cheaper Damnations and cheaper Angel's Graces and cards like that.
I as somebody who, for background, I mean, I've been playing also for quite some time, so it wasn't like I started like, a few weeks ago. So this is something that I think, definitely just isn't for me anymore. I think, that this is just, when's Strixhaven? I'm in that camp, because I am really excited for Strixhaven. And this, the only thing I want from it is maybe the Thoughtseize. Maybe.
So if you asked me a couple months ago if I wanted old bordered cards, I would have said yes. However, when I look at these cards, I'm like, And I realize that I'm not an old border lover. I'm original printing lover, right? The question is, do you play original printing or do you play old border now? And for me, it's actually original printing, which I didn't realize until I thought about it carefully. So, like, these cards,
really?
Yeah, like, I don't know, like, I'd rather just play original printing, right?
So you'd play, like, Lorwyn Thoughtseize over old border Thoughtseize? Yes.
Like, given the same price, I would, right? Whatever's cheaper is what I'll probably play. So, the new art. But I think part of the appeal of the old frame is, like, it's a part of history, right? Like, it's like an old card. Someone played it. It's like old. And I kind of like that aspect of it. So having it like be fake old doesn't really do much for me. So I'm like,
I think for me, these would be the version I would play of basically every card that they've reprinted in Old Border. Like, if I'm building a deck, this would be my default choice would be the Old Border choice. But I also, like, am the person who, like, refuses to play land art that I really like if it's not an Old Border, because I just don't like the new border very much. So, so I'm sure I'm far on one end of the scale. It's going to be interesting to see the value of these cards, because the Old Border cards are essentially mythics, the way they're being distributed. Like, they're all the same rarity, so your odds of getting Thoughtseize is the same as, whatever, Lingering Souls or Shriekmaw or something. So it's going to be interesting to see how the prices break down on these. I would guess that they're going to be expensive, but after talking to both of you, I don't know. Like, if there's a lot of people that just either don't care about it at all or prefer original borders, maybe they won't be as expensive as I'm expecting.
I think, like, legacy and vintage players might have more affinity to these, but, like, how many of those exist, right? Like, how many paper legacy and vintage players are still out there, right? Like, you know, like, yeah, you want your Merfolk deck to look consistent, so I'll take this old border, right? Or I'll take the old border Thoughtseize or old border Ponder. Like, I'm guessing the blue spells will be very expensive, like Ponder, Treasure Cruise. Wait, Treasure Cruise legal anymore? I don't know. True Name Nemesis. Things like that will be expensive just because you have a deck full of old cards and then the 1 or 2 new cards are like an eyesore. So you're like, I gotta replace it. But if you're playing a modern deck, like it's mostly new cards. Like, does the new Ponder really look out of place? Like the old Ponder, like, these are not going to be cheap, right? Like if these were the same price, maybe, but these will be like significantly more expensive, right?
I just really hope they come to Arena. I know the set's not coming to Arena, but I hope that the ones that are playable in Historic, like Thoughtseize, Disdainful Stroke, Ethereal Armor, like, I hope that those cards, maybe Ethereal Armor's not on that list, but I hope that the ones that are playable on Arena show up as card styles. Because
as card styles?
Yes, that would get my money.
Look at that.
I wouldn't buy just like I wouldn't buy ones that aren't legal. Like, I'm not going to buy your Mystic Confluence or something that I can't play anywhere, but the ones that I can actually play in Historic, I would spend money to get the card styles and play them.
Seth, I don't care
wish
about
this
cosmetics.
would go into Historic, to be honest with you. I think that'd been really fun, but...
Can you imagine all of these cards in Historic?
I mean, you know, they would just like remove some of the stuff like Dread Return or whatever, but like Damnation could be in Historic. Lots of this stuff could probably be in Historic. I mean, why not finish out the Pact cycle, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it also would be a way for them to maybe eventually work towards Modern, like throw this stuff in there, and who knows, maybe 20 years from now, just like accidentally most of the Modern cards are on there and we can actually have Modern on Arena. That would be kind of sweet.
Yeah.
One other Time Spiral Remastered question. They announced that Sprout Swarm will not be in the set. And you might be wondering why that is relevant, because Sprout Swarm is just a random common. It's like the most iconic limited card from original Time Spiral block. It is miserable because of buyback and convoke. It is very difficult to interact with, and you just make a ton of tokens, and it is super obnoxious, not a fun, healthy limited card, but it also is one of the most iconic decks and cards from original Time Spiral. What do you think about removing an iconic card that probably isn't fun or healthy? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for a set like this? Like, you diminish the nostalgia factor because you're not going to be able to play the Sprout Swarm decks, but at the same time, you theoretically improve the format overall because pretty much everyone agrees Sprout Swarm wasn't a good deck to have exist in the format. What do you think about that?
I mean, I kind of came to already expect that and understand. I mean, when you think about the other remastered sets, like we don't have Felidar Sovereign, right? And whatnot. I mean, granted that's on Arena as opposed to like paper. I just feel like the philosophies, like they probably apply the same things, right? It's like, well, if we could remaster our sets, what were the blemishes on the set? What were the obvious problems? Like if they had to remaster Eldraine, it just wouldn't. Well, first off, they just wouldn't do it because none of the cards would come back. But like, so the thing here is, I think that's kind of just not surprising for a remastered set, and I welcome it.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, if they put it back in, that means there is no limited format, right? So you're just selling like packs. You're selling set boosters at this point. So they have to balance limited. So yes, if they, whenever they remaster set, they have to remove the broken card, I think. So, or like the other way would be to make it mythic or something weird so that you could see it, but it's not that common. But I think that's just weird. I think just removing it, like everyone understands it's broken. It's not a theoretical improvement. It's like an actual improvement. Everyone knows that card is broken. So for you to actually play games unlimited, they should just remove it. So I think I'm fine with that. And like, really, like, what nostalgia will be lost? Like, do you really want to sit down and have your opponents Sprout Swarm you to death? And you're like, yes, I feel so good. Thank you, Wizards, for this boost of nostalgia, right? Like,
that's what I want to relive.
I don't think you really want that, right?
What do you think about taking it to the next step then and just like fixing limited? Like, I think a recent example would be Ikoria, which is a format people really liked, except Zenith Flare, pretty much everyone agrees, like, either shouldn't have existed or should have been like mythic or something, so it doesn't show up very often. What do you think, like, if everyone agrees that Ikoria is great, except for Zenith Flare, should Wizards just be like, it's banned, or it's whatever, we're gonna bump up its rarity on Arena, so now it is a mythic rare when you open your draft packs? Do you think that would be a good idea?
I mean, I guess that could help it, right? If you make, but then it's like, it feels weird, right? Like, for outside of limited, because they have to balance two things here: limited playability and the fact that, like, let's say for the person that doesn't play limited, if I open Zenith Flare, I'm gonna be very sad.
That is true. There are economic ramifications.
That's worse than
wild card.
I would rather. I mean, I'd be happy to open a Soul of Innistrad. You know what I mean? But seeing this in Mythic,
like it's not relevant because no one plays that format anymore. I guess on Arena they come back, but in general, like once a set goes, it goes, right? So it's fine that it's broken for a while. Like if you ban the card and you draft, what are you gonna do? Like be down a card in the pack? Like how do you fix that, right? So I think it's fine that they just leave it alone because at least in paper, like you don't draft again, right? And if you do draft again, like 5 years from now, you probably want that nostalgia, right? Like if you want the Sprout Swarm, go buy a original box of Time Spiral and go Sprout Swarm yourself, right? So that's always an option. So I think it's fine that they actually do this. I'd rather do that than rather just like ruin all of limited because like this is here, right?
Yeah. I guess I think I agree overall. Although it does make me a little sad because I do like the nostalgia aspect, but I guess it is a remix set.
I think you should lose to Sprout Swarm one more time, and then you'll go, oh, you know what? I don't miss that as much.
You just gotta be the one that drafts the Sprout Swarm, Crim, obviously. But being a remix set, I think it makes sense. Is there one other question? And then we gotta get some fish mail. In Limited, if you could remove one card, I asked this on Twitter, if you could remove one card from one limited format to improve it, what would you pick?
I mean, Zenith Flare is actually a glaring, because that's the most recent thing I can think of when I played Limited.
Yeah, that's Zenith Flare. Zenith Flare is a really good option. I think another one I would consider would be like Invisible Stalker in Original Innistrad. Like that is... Original Innistrad is known as one of the best draft formats, but pretty much everyone agrees the like jank you out with an Invisible Stalker and a random like common or uncommon equipment was like the worst part of that format, and the one thing that people really didn't like. Or like Pack Rat would be another example where it was just like
so good,
essentially unbeatable. Like if you open Pack Rat, you're just gonna like 3-0 your draft because unbeatable is like a slight exaggeration, but it was like one of the best limited cards in the history of Magic. Is there anything that sticks out for you, Richard, where if I could get rid of this one card, the format would be so much better?
You know what's funny?
No, because that's the charm of all these formats, right? And they rotate relatively quickly, so I'm fine with it, right? Like the reason I don't like Standard is like it's so expensive to play and it rotates too frequently with these like weird bannings and power creep cards. But in Limited, like you're paying the same price no matter what, right? You know, every time you play a draft, it's the same price. And then you can play with the broken stuff. And then next set release, it's reset. You don't have to deal with Pack Rat anymore. You don't have to deal with Zenith Flare anymore. So I think these kind of cards like add a little charm to the format. And then, you know, there's always the period of time where nobody knows they're broken, right? Where it's not like information kind of moves slower in draft than in Standard. Like after one day, everyone knows Uro's busted or Omnath is busted, but it takes people a bit to like learn to draft Spider Spawning or something, right? Or like Invisible Stalker, Cleaver, or Zenith Flare. You know, it takes a while, so I'm fine with that. And even if you know that it exists, it doesn't happen every single pod, right? And it doesn't happen every single game, unlike Standard where it just happens all the time. So I'm fine with the way Limited is, and I would not actually change any of these older formats because we get new ones all the time.
And I guess it's even less impactful today since we don't have blocks. I know like back in the like whatever Kamigawa era where Jite whatever is just unbeatable. You had it for the first set, then you had it after Savior's release, and you had it after the Betrayer's release. So you'd have to deal with the broken card for like an entire year of Limited because the main set would remain in the format. Now everything's one set blocks, so 2-3 months later, like you push it aside, move on to the next one. So I think that's another good argument for it. Why broken cards like Zenith Flare might be less impactful than broken cards in the past because you're only seeing them for a couple months compared to an entire year. Anyway, Richard, we got a little bit of time. Fishmail us.
All right. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. @Aldonian, what is each of y'all's preferred way of organizing your collection? Who has the superior method?
My method is those medium flat rate boxes, the like long tall ones that you can get from the post office. I have a closet that is basically full of those, which are full of random Magic cards, and I have no idea what's in there. So
to combat
Seth, no system.
I think Seth might actually have more organization because they are in the box. So he's already beaten me because my friend went into my car a while back, and my foil Jace the Mind Sculptor was in my cup holder. So,
I did find an overgrown tomb expedition under my couch one one
right. So maybe we're about on a parody.
Yeah, so we might be about the same.
Yeah, because I found my Liliana of the Veil back when she wasn't reprinted yet, and I found her in the trackpad of under the seat of my car. I've also had. I didn't even know where, I was like, where is my entire modern deck, my Esper modern deck? And it was just, where it was in my cupboard next to my dishes. I don't know what I was doing, but I guess I was like holding my deck and trying to do dishes. Two things that should not be near each other. Just say.
I was looking for like some salt or something in my cupboard the other day, and I found like an old like revised rare in there for some reason. So I don't know how Magic cards get to where they are. Yeah. It's kind of like
the TV remote. To be honest with you,
yeah, kind of like the TV remote, or like I can't think of the movie. What is the one where like the stuffed animals or whatever come? It's Toy Story.
Chucky?
They come alive, but only when there's no people there.
Chucky.
I feel like my Magic cards do that. Like if I'm sleeping and I can't see them, they just kind of like walk around my apartment and do their own thing. But then when I wake up, they all like freeze real quick. And
that's a lot scarier than just misplacing it.
Don't worry, Seth. 2023
Seth's house
is when
is
we'll
actually
have...
just haunted. He just doesn't know it.
Yeah, it might be.
Toy Story Magic the Gathering expansion coming soon. Don't worry about it.
Just saying, Buzz Lightyear.
I'm slightly more organized than you guys. I have my expensive cards in a binder. Everything else is together, so I can't find like $5 cards, but I can find fetch lands maybe. But the problem is like the value of these cards change over time. So like I probably have expensive cards somewhere, and I just like keep buying more because I can't find them ever again. It just takes so much time to organize cards, and it's not fun, so I don't do it.
Yeah, it's definitely not fun.
I mean, some people really like organizing their cards, and they have like little dividers for every set, and every set they have rarity, and they label it all, and they can actually find their cards. That's just way too much work. I have like one box called like GBX, where I have just GBX cards for Modern, and I just dig into that box every time I need to help out Tarmogoyf.
I'm pretty sure that, don't lie, it's called Modern Staples, right? This box is definitely called Modern Staples for Richard, and it's just Tarmogoyf. It's just
and also like 20 copies of Strangleroot Dice. That's it.
So you can choose.
Because one might get damaged or lost, and you don't want to.
Yeah.
You don't want to ever be without a Strangleroot Dice when you.
He's got his backup game day promo in case the first one gets lost, and then there's the normal one.
I actually do have the game day promos of Strangleroot Dice, but that is neither here nor there. Next question. Quilted Train. Hey guys, do you think horsemanship will return for Lord of the Rings?
Oh,
get ready for all these questions,
please.
Folks.
No.
I mostly don't want it to, only because of the value that I would, because like I play, what is it, Sun Quan, or the blue one that gives all my creatures horsemanship in my rogues deck. So, but if there's more things that give horsemanship, that's not that great anymore. Other than that, I don't really care if it comes back.
It's just such a horrible
not banding.
mechanic. So I'm going to say
no. Horsemanship. It's just flying. That's not flying.
But we already have flying. How many versions of flying do we need in Magic?
I mean,
well, here's another one.
If some guy's charging it with a horse on you, are you really going to stop him if you're on foot?
The only way you're going to stop him is if you're on your own horse. So yeah. I get it.
But they gotta make it more complex. If you have flying, you should be able to block horsemanship because you can swoop down and hit them. But, what if you have banding and horsemanship?
Then what happens when they get like
double like mega flying or like dragon ship or something like that, and then the dragon swoops down and eats the flyer.
That's the How to Train Your Dragon expansion. That's still 2 years out, Krim. Sorry.
I mean, that still could happen. There's a D&D set.
All right. Second part of the question. What IPs are on your crossover wish list? So we know you're Lord of the Rings haters. Which IP do you actually want to see with the crossover?
If I could pick one, and just one, it would probably be Marvel. I mean, you know, with my moniker, my handle, and everything, like, is anybody really surprised? Probably not. And then after that, a close, like a distant second place would probably just be like Warcraft, or you know what, or Final Fantasy. You know, Richard, I think you could appreciate that. We already have the Amano art, right, from War of the Spark.
Yeah,
we're not that far off, right? We've already got our foot in the door for Final Fantasy.
Oh, this is tough because most of the things I like, I don't think would make good Magic cards. Someone asked me like, "Oh, like
the Big Lebowski set.
Would you like a Bojack crossover?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I like Bojack, but I just can't imagine how that would work as a Magic card." Like, so I think, considering that I actually want there to be some connection to Magic, I'm gonna go with Game of Thrones. The last couple seasons obviously were not as good as the first ones, but overall, Game of Thrones was still a really good show, and I think it would work really well with the fantasy theme. And there's a lot of cool characters in the show. So if I gotta pick one, I'm gonna go Game of Thrones,
I think that's actually very highly likely. Give it like 4 more years so that Game of Thrones is really dead, and then look at the IP.
I don't know. Game of Thrones has been dead for me since like season 5. So.
Well,
is that old? Like, you know, at this point, I may as well just pile it on. You know?
We gotta be 15 years behind the curve to make it. I want to see.
I'm just gonna keep piling on things that people will hate me for.
I want to see anime.
Krim's good at being the arch enemy.
Give me some anime, and Magic Japan will totally make it happen. Like a Fate crossover, even like a Naruto crossover. I'll take any. Evangelion. I'll take any. Evangelion. I would buy the whole set. I would like spend more money.
4 of each.
I will happily replace Tarmogoyf with whatever the heck.
Ava Unit
1, okay, is now Tarmogoyf. I would 100% get it, okay?
I would probably play green if that were the case.
Yeah. So I want to see an anime crossover, which I think is also very likely, given that they like randomly put anime art and stuff on cards for Japanese release products. So I'd like to see that. But I'd rather have like the Lily art, where they have like the original card and then it's just done in the art style of the format. I think I guess last question. This is a little interesting we haven't talked about. Hato 200. Now that Simian Spirit Guide is gone from Modern, where are we on unbanned Chrome Mox plan? I feel like 2 for 1ing yourself to get extra mana is worth keeping in the format to enable prison strategies, while not being as good for ad nauseum / combo decks.
I do not think that should be unbanned. I think that what I think should have happened was that Simian Spirit Guide should have been taken out a long time ago. I'm not a fan of the mana accelerant that existed for a good chunk of Modern's duration in existence.
I'm gonna steal a page from the Companion Lovers playbook and say, we shouldn't have banned Simian Spirit Guide. We should have just made more of them. If everyone has a Simian Spirit Guide, then it's theoretically fair. So the problem is I mean, you don't have a blue one. What if you want to play Teferi a turn earlier,
okay,
Krim? See if you also could experience the joys of Spirit Guides. but seriously, I think Chromox is just better than Simian Spirit Guide. So if they're banning Simian Spirit Guide, I don't think there's any way you unban Chrome Mox, because I think Chrome Mox, it makes mana every turn. Yes, it's a 2 for 1 rather than a 1 for 1, but the upside is you make mana every turn instead of a 1-shot, and it's also a spell, so it ups your storm count, etc., etc., etc. So I think that Chrome Mox is just very much better than Simian Spirit Guide, and if Simian Spirit Guide's too good, Chrome Mox is definitely too good.
Yeah, I agree. Chrome Mox is just better as Spirit Guide. I think Spirit Guide is actually fine right now. The problem is it scales with how strong the rest of your cards are. So given power creep and what Wizards is printing, like, it will eventually become a problem if it's not already a problem. Like, it's okay if you Simian Spirit Guide like a Tarmogoyf for whatever reason, right? But if you like Simian Spirit Guide out an Oko, ahead of curve, it's like super problematic, right? And eventually, it's just like an instant win, like trickery. So I think they should just get rid of it because they keep printing more powerful cards, and the more powerful your cards, the better it is to get them out early. So this is just a disaster waiting to happen. So no more fast mana in Modern.
Yeah, no more fast mana in Modern. And to follow that up, Richard, do you know how bad a turn 1 Tarmogoyf is?
Okay, hold on. I can make it work. Okay? You crack a fetch. You crack a fetch. You Gitaxian Probe. That's bad.
Yes, Street Race cycle.
Street Race. Yeah, okay. And then instead of playing Death Shadow, what you do is you play Tarmogoyf.
That's so much worse.
Mishra's Bobble, maybe get the artifact in the graveyard. So that actually sounds great. It's like a 7-card combo to make a 3/4.
And they're like Fatal Push. I'm like, cool.
Scoop.
All right.
Richard's still pining for the Fatal Push banning, so don't worry about that.
I just need a Tarmogoyf that's protection from black and white. That's what I need. I need hexproof Tarmogoyf, and then I'm good to go.
Maybe in a Universes Beyond.
Yeah.
Give me what's an overpowered, like in the Lion King crossover we'll have.
I'm telling you right now, they're gonna make a robotic golem, and it's gonna be Meteor Golem, and it's gonna do the same thing. It's just gonna blow something up when it enters the battlefield. But Meteor Golem, that's gonna be the card. You know it's gonna exist.
All right, that's all the time we have for Fishville this week. Thank you to everyone who sent them in. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail. And we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 318 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard Grimm, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about the rest of Spiral Remastered and whatever else goes on in the world of Magic. So, until then, everyone, have a great week. And this is the crew signing out.